Hey, this is Ryan from 60 Cycle Hum, the Guitar Podcast. Today I'm going to have some fun comparing the current version of the Duo Sonic to the 90s reissue version of the Duo Sonic. Just like when I compared this guy to the Squier Mustang, I'm going to start at the top and work my way all the way down to the bottom. Let's start off with the tuners on the Mexican 90s reissue Duo Sonic. The tuners this thing came with, I didn't like them at the time. I bought this thing 20 years ago, and the tuners were the first thing I changed. I swapped in a set of Grover Minis that honestly completely changed the playability of this guitar, and that it made it playable. Before, it wasn't able to hold tune. It would slip out of tune often, and it was just pretty problematic, especially for a teenage player in the 90s. So swapping tuners was a big upgrade on this. I recommend it if you buy one of these used. The tuners on the current version of the Duo Sonic are just fine. They're just like any other Mexican Fender tuners. They probably are. They all come out of the same bucket, I'm sure. Completely stable, nice and smooth. There's no reason to change them unless you have a personal preference, like you want locking tuners or something with a different ratio. The nuts on both guitars are cut just fine. I've never had big issues with them binding or, the strings popping and tinging when you're tuning it. They're fine. Nothing to complain about there. Palfaro fretboard on this guy. Maple fretboard on the 90s reissue, obviously. There's some big differences in the shapes and scale lengths of the neck. There's a 24-inch scale on the new version of the Duo Sonic, which is reminiscent of like a Mustang scale. And it's got a nice full feel to it that's going to remind you of a Strat or a Tele, something very normal from the Fender lineup. The neck on the 90s reissue is very different. The original Duo Sonics came in a 22.5-inch scale. For some reason, when they did the reissues, Fender made these a 22.7-inch scale. I don't know why the 0.2 difference, but they decided to go that way. But still, 22.7 is a super short neck, and this thing feels short. You might not immediately notice that this is short scale when you pick up the current version of the Duo Sonic, but when you pick up the 90s version, you're going to be shocked how short it is. It's like a baby guitar, and the neck itself is so thin. It's like a toothpick. You'll also notice that there's no skunk stripe on the back of the neck for the 90s reissue. That's because the truss rod doesn't come out of the headstock. It comes out down here underneath the pickguard. So you've got to take the pickguard off if you're going to do any truss adjustment, which you shouldn't need to do. The neck on mine has been straight as an arrow for 20 years now and has never once needed an adjustment. The neck on the current version does have a skunk stripe, which means it gets to have truss adjustment up on the headstock. Also, I don't think you're going to need to adjust that either, but it's there and it's more convenient on this guitar. Let's move down to the body. Both of the bodies are nearly identical. I mean, the guitars feel about the same weight. They're the same thickness. The bodies line up with each other. They're the same shape and size. There's no real difference there. The wood, I'm sure, comes from a different stock 20 years later. It might even be a different kind of wood. I honestly don't know. But this is a very familiar feeling guitar when I'm wearing it after being so familiar with the 90s Duo Sonic. It felt like coming home putting this guy on, I'll say that. Down on the pickguard and in the controls is where things really start to get different if this neck scale wasn't different enough. I've always loved the sound of the pickups in this guitar. I've left the stock pickups. I've never changed them. They just have this warm, like, thud to them. And they've got a lot of character. They're not super, super quacky. Like they really have their own thing going on. I've been a big fan of the sound of this guitar because of that. I've even bought 90s reissue Duo Sonic pickups and tried to put them into another guitar to recapture that sound. But I think it's a combination of these pickups with this particular build of the guitar that makes it sound the way it does. The pickups in this guitar just don't sound the same. They're probably better pickups on paper, but they have a different sound. The neck has a very quacky, characteristic Fender Strat neck sort of sound, which is great, and it's tons of fun to play around with. The bridge humbucker, it's got a really nice, mature, like kind of delicate, nuanced sort of thing going on, where you can really bring a lot of character out of it for a humbucker. It's not dead sounding. It's not just a big, chunk of mud. It's a good sounding humbucker. And this guitar has a lot of switching options. You've got a push-pull coil split for the humbucker, and of course, all your other settings here. You got all your bridge, middle, and neck on the 90s reissue as well. And then you got tone and volume on each. Pretty basic, pretty similar there. But yeah, pickups sound very different in the new version compared to the old version, and you'll hear that in some playing that I do here in a little bit. Pickguard shapes are a little bit different. If you really look at them, there's a little bit of a swoop here. And obviously, because the bridges are different, the pickguards are shaped different to accommodate it. I couldn't take the pickguard off of this guitar and swap it onto this one, even though the body shapes and sizes are the same. So that leads to the bridge. The bridges are very different. On the 90s reissue, you have a bridge that is basically the same version of a bridge from the original Duo Sonics from the 60s. You've got a 3-saddle, like Telecaster sort of thing going on with these bar saddles that take 2 strings at a time. There's a little bit of limited intonation adjustment there, but it's honestly never bothered me all that much. With a guitar with a scale this short, it's kind of forgiving. Like, that's not the part that you're worrying about when you're playing it. The strings are top loaded. They don't go through the body. They stop underneath this little lip here. And some people prefer that, like on Telecasters and whatnot. I think it works well for this guitar. It brings out a little bit more twang, I think. And then this guitar has string through, which other people prefer. I think there's a perception that if the string is going through the wood of the body, that you're going to get more resonance from the wood of the guitar, maybe more sustain because it's passing through more material or something. People could debate that all day. Go ahead and tackle it in the comments if you feel like it. But the big difference to me is that you've got a 6-saddle bridge here, which means you can intonate and adjust the action of every single string exactly how you want it, which technically is an improvement over the 3-saddle bridge on here. It makes this concept of a guitar much more playable in a modern sense. As far as tone goes, I don't know. I don't know if there's a big tonal difference between this bridge and that bridge, besides it being string through or being top loading. And that's up for debate. Other differences? I can't think of any. I think they're both very fine playing guitars. I think they're both worth checking out if you're Duo Sonic curious. Every now and then these come up on eBay, and they seem to land somewhere between like $250 and like $400, I think, depending on the condition and how desperate someone is to buy one. These guys right now are brand new for $499 to $525, depending on the retailer, I think. And then the shipping is, figure it out yourself, I guess. So I don't have anything else to say. I'm going to do some playing now. Thanks for watching. Do all the normal YouTube stuff. Subscribe, like, comment, dislike. Tell me that I suck. I don't care. Later, guys.